The vote clock read 11 hours. Ambassador Marcus Cole had not slept in 4 days. He stood in the corridor outside the Galactic Assembly's Grand Deliberation Hall on Ethai Station, his gray suit wrinkled at the elbows, his jaw dark with stubble, and his eyes carrying the flat, dry weight of a man who had stopped counting caffeine pills 2 days ago. The morning session had collapsed. 3 abstentions where he needed affirmatives. The Cethari bloc was wavering. And Resolution 7 Sigma, the motion to restore Earth's full trade sovereignty after 18 years of punitive tariffs, required 41 votes out of 80 to pass. He had 38 confirmed. 3 short, 11 hours left. His aide, Lieutenant Commander Priya Okonkwo, appeared at his elbow with a data slate and a face that said she'd already read the bad news twice. The Velathi delegate rescinded her pledge, Priya said quietly. 20 minutes ago, no explanation, just a formal retraction filed with the assembly clerk. Marcus absorbed that without moving. 37. 4 short, 11 hours. He looked at the polished floor of the corridor, white stone veined with something that resembled copper but wasn't, and let the number settle into his bones. 4. In a body of 80 sovereign delegations where humanity had exactly 1 seat, no military leverage, no trade bloc, no formal allies, and a reputation for being the species that had been sanctioned for defending a convoy of refugee ships 18 years ago. Who filed the challenge motion? He asked. High Arbiter Solène Drathais, hegemonic pact bloc. She's pushing for an accelerated countervote to make the tariffs permanent. Priya's voice was steady, but her eyes were tight. If we don't pass 7 Sigma before the clock expires, the countermotion goes to the floor tomorrow with momentum, and we won't get another window for 6 years. Marcus straightened his cuffs. The fabric was soft from too many hours. Then we have 11 hours, he said. Get me the abstention list. The Galactic Assembly on Ethai Station was not designed for humans. The Grand Deliberation Hall was a vast amphitheater carved from pale blue-gray stone, with 80 tiered seats arranged in a sweeping horseshoe 3 levels high. A glass dome rose overhead, structural, enormous, flooding the chamber with the white-gold light of Ethai's twin suns. Through that dome, on any given session day, the orbital traffic of a dozen species diplomatic fleets hung against a bright sky like slow-moving constellations. Humans had held their single seat for 22 years. For 18 of those years, they had held it under Resolution 4 Kappa, the punitive tariff package that the Assembly had passed 6 months after the Verath Corridor incident. Earth's crime responding to a distress signal from Orinthian refugee ships being fired upon by hegemonic pact privateers, and destroying the privateers in the process, had been reframed as unilateral military intervention in sovereign space. The tariffs had strangled Earth's interstellar trade. Colonies had starved. Supply lines had withered. The pact had called it proportional. Humanity had called it what it was. And for 18 years, every attempt to repeal it had died in committee, or on the floor, or in the quiet back channels where the hegemonic pact's 6 votes moved as one, and their economic leverage moved 12 more. Resolution 7 Sigma was Marcus Cole's 3rd attempt. He'd written the first version 9 years ago as a junior at Hachette. The second had failed by 11 votes. This one, painstakingly negotiated over 3 years of corridor meetings, trade concessions, and the slow accumulation of moral debts, had come within 3 votes of passage. And now he was 4 short with 11 hours left, and he hadn't slept since the session before last. The first name on the abstention list was Delegate Torin Vaz of the Methali Sovereignty. Marcus found him in the Assembly's lower refectory, a cavernous space with arched windows looking out over the station's botanical ring. Vaz was tall, most Methali were, standing nearly 7 feet with pale blue-gray skin stretched over angular frames, and he sat alone at a table designed for his proportions, his 4-fingered hands wrapped around a thermal cylinder of something that steamed faintly violet. Marcus approached without hurrying. He pulled out the chair opposite, too tall for him, so his feet didn't quite reach the floor, and sat. Vaz looked at him with eyes the color of old bronze. Ambassador Cole. Delegate Vaz. A pause, the Methali's thin lips pressed together. You look unwell. I've looked worse. Marcus folded his hands on the table. The data slate stayed in his pocket. You abstained this morning. I did. You pledged 2 weeks ago. I withdrew that pledge. Marcus waited. He'd learned in 9 years of assembly work that silence pulled more from aliens than questions did. Methali in particular found silence uncomfortable. Their vocal range extended into frequencies humans couldn't hear, and they filled quiet spaces with subaudible hums without realizing it. A human who simply sat still, quiet, watching, was, to a Methali, a void. Vaz's hum rose. He set down the cylinder. The hegemonic pact has offered the Methali sovereignty preferential shipping rates through the Varath corridor, effective immediately, contingent on our abstention being maintained. A bribe. A trade incentive. Contingent on a political vote. Marcus's voice didn't rise, didn't sharpen. He stated it the way you state the temperature of a room. That's a bribe, delegate. Vaz's bronze eyes flickered. The subaudible hum shifted pitch, discomfort. The sovereignty has 38 colony worlds dependent on Varath corridor shipping. The tariff reduction the pact is offering would save us 11% on transit costs annually. My government instructed you to abstain. Yes. Marcus nodded slowly. He looked at the botanical ring through the window. Green things growing in artificial sunlight. 37 species idea of gardens, all cultivated side by side. Delegate Vaz, he said, still looking at the window. In the 18 years since Resolution 4 Kappa passed, how many Methali cargo vessels have been detained at hegemonic pact checkpoints? Vaz didn't answer immediately. I can tell you, Marcus said. 1,406, detained, inspected, delayed between 4 and 90 hours each. Cargo spoilage claims totaling, as of last cycle, 1.3 billion standard credits, filed with the Assembly Trade Commission, unresolved. He turned back to Vaz. The pact is offering you 11% on shipping rates. They're costing you 23% in delays and spoilage that they have no intention of stopping. The tariff structure that lets them run those checkpoints exists because of 4 Kappa, because the punitive framework gave them jurisdiction over security inspections of any vessel transiting space adjacent to Earth-sanctioned corridors. He let that sit. Repeal 4 Kappa, Marcus said, and the pact loses the legal framework for those checkpoints. Your 38 colony world saved 23%, not 11%. Vaz's hum went silent. Marcus stood, his legs ached, his head felt like packed sand. I'm not asking you to do this for Earth, he said. I'm asking you to count. He left the refectory without looking back. 9 hours left. Priya met him in the corridor with a fresh data slate. Vaz. Give him 2 hours, he'll check the numbers. If his government's trade office confirms, he'll flip. Marcus took the slate. Who's next? Delegate Oris Fenn, Trilateral Commerce League. She abstained this morning and she's been ducking your calls for 3 days. Where is she? Private suite level 7. She's not taking visitors. Marcus kept walking. Then I'll wait outside her door until she does. He waited 40 minutes. His back against the corridor wall, his eyes half closed. His body running on nothing but the mechanical insistence of a man who had learned long ago that endurance was the only currency that never devalued. Aides from other delegations walked past. Some glanced. A Velathi attaché, young, with the iridescent throat patches of a junior diplomat, stopped and stared for a moment, then hurried on. At 41 minutes the door opened. Delegate Oris Fenn stood in the frame, a trilateral which meant compact, four-armed, with skin the color of deep amber, and a face arranged around 3 dark eyes that blinked independently. She wore the Commerce League's formal wraps, deep red silk layered over black, cinched at the waist with a braided cord. "Ambassador," her voice was dry, clipped. "I said no visitors." "I'm not visiting," Marcus said, still leaning against the wall. "I'm standing in a public corridor." Her upper left eye narrowed. Semantics. Diplomacy. A beat, then she stepped back, and the gesture with her lower right arm was unmistakable. Enter. Her suite was small by assembly standards. A sitting area, a desk covered in hollow projections of trade routes, and a window that looked out on the bright sky and the distant shapes of vessels. Marcus didn't sit until she gestured. "I abstained," Fenn said, settling into her own chair, "because the Commerce League board voted 7-5 to maintain neutrality. I don't have discretionary authority on this." 7-5, Marcus repeated. "Correct. Which 5 are sympathetic?" "Ambassador." "Delegate Fenn." He leaned forward. The exhaustion wasn't gone, it was never gone, but something harder lived beneath it, and it surfaced now. "The Commerce League's 5 dissenting board members voted for engagement because Earth's market, unsanctioned, is worth 4 times its current value to your consortium. I know this because I've read your quarterly projections. They're not classified. They're filed with the Assembly Economic Commission. 4 times. Fenn's 3 eyes all focused on him. And the 7 who voted against engagement did so because the hegemonic pact buys 60% of our processed helium exports. If we antagonize the pact, 60% of a commodity, the pact cannot source elsewhere within 3 cycles. You think they'll embargo their own fuel supply because you voted for a tariff repeal?" Fenn was quiet. "Your board voted 7-5 out of fear," Marcus said. "Not calculation, fear of a trade war the pact cannot afford to start." He paused. "Contact your board, ask them to recount, not for Earth, for your own projections." He stood. His vision grayed at the edges just for a second, and he gripped the back of the chair until it passed. "You need sleep, Ambassador," Fenn said. "I need 1 more vote than I have," Marcus replied and left. 7 hours left. The tally, 37 confirmed. Vaz had not yet responded. Fenn was contacting her board. 2 possibles, 0 confirmed flips. Still 4 short. Marcus stood in the observation gallery above the grand deliberation hall, looking down at the empty tiers. The vote clock projected on the dome's inner surface. 06:58:44. Counting down in glowing amber numerals that most species could read. The glass dome above showed the bright sky. Ethise's twin suns had shifted since morning, casting long golden light through the panes, painting the pale stone floor in warm stripes. Through the dome, Earth's delegation vessel, a single diplomatic frigate, the EDS Patience, not armed for war, not here to threaten, just present, waiting. "Like him." Marcus, Priya again at his shoulder. "I have something. The Orinthian delegate, Ambassador Celes Thorn." Marcus turned. "Thorn has voted against us in every session for 6 years." "I know, but his aide made a quiet approach to our junior attaché 20 minutes ago, off the record. He wants a meeting." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not hope. He'd burned through hope 3 days ago. Something more structural, like a load-bearing wall settling 1 degree closer to plumb. "Where?" "The meditation gardens, level 3, he says alone." "Then I go alone." The meditation gardens were the quietest place on Ethai Station. Low gravity, the station's designers had reduced it here to half standard, so the water features rose in slow, impossible arcs. Plants from 40 worlds grew in careful arrangements. The light was filtered, golden, warm. Ambassador Celes Thorn of the Orinthian Republic sat on a bench shaped for his species, broader lower, with a backrest that accommodated the bony ridge that ran from an Orinthian skull to mid-spine. He was old, Marcus could see it in the way his silver-green skin had thinned at the temples, the way his hands, six-fingered, delicate, rested on his knees with the careful stillness of someone managing chronic pain. Thorne had been a young delegate 18 years ago. He had voted for Resolution 4 Kappa. Marcus sat on the adjacent bench, wrong shape, wrong height, but he'd stopped caring about comfort 4 days ago and waited. My granddaughter, Thorne said after a long silence, was on one of those refugee ships. Marcus didn't move. The convoy your vessel defended in the Varath corridor, 18 years ago. Thorne's voice was thin, precise. She was 7, an Orinthian child on an Orinthian refugee ship being fired upon by hegemonic Pact privateers. Your frigate answered the distress call, destroyed the attackers, escorted the convoy to safety. He paused. And I voted for 4 Kappa. I voted to punish you for saving her. The garden's water rose and fell in its slow arcs. Marcus said nothing. I voted, Thorne continued, because my government instructed me to, because the Pact held our reconstruction loans, because I was told it was politics. That Earth would recover. That 18 years of tariffs was proportional. His thin fingers tightened on his knees. My granddaughter is 25 now. She works in disaster relief. She has never forgiven me. Marcus still didn't speak. His body was heavy with fatigue, but his mind was very still. I cannot give you my vote publicly, Thorne said. If I break with the Orinthian voting bloc, my government will recall me before the session ends. Then what are you offering? Thorne turned his head. His eyes, deep amber, creased at the corners, met Marcus's. I'm offering you information. The Orinthian bloc is 3 votes. We vote as 1. But Delegate Matthijs, our junior representative, has been privately opposed to 4 Kappa for 5 years. If there were a procedural mechanism by which the bloc could split without formal dissolution. A conscience vote, Marcus said. Yes. That requires a motion from the floor. By a member of the bloc. It requires a motion from any assembly member, endorsed by 1 member of the bloc. Marcus looked at him. You'll endorse it. I will endorse it, quietly, before the clock runs out, if you can find someone to make the motion. Marcus stood. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Thank you, Ambassador. Don't thank me. Thorne's voice was barely above a whisper. I'm 18 years late. 5 hours left. Marcus walked through the station's corridors with a new number in his head, 3. If the Orinthian bloc split on a conscience vote and Matthijs voted yes, that was 1. If Vaz flipped, 2. If Fenn's board recounted, 3. 37 plus 3 was 40, 1 short of 41. 1 short. He needed someone to make the conscience vote motion. Someone with standing. Someone the assembly would take seriously. Someone who wasn't human, because a human making the motion would be dismissed as self-interested maneuvering. He knew who he needed. He also knew she would say no. High Delegate Shorn Koth of the Valish Accord had voted for 7 Sigma in the morning session. She was already confirmed. She was not the problem. The problem was that making a conscience vote motion for another species bloc was a political act that would mark her, publicly, permanently, as Earth's ally. And the Valish Accord, with its 12 colony worlds and its careful neutrality between the Pact and the Independents, had spent 40 years avoiding exactly that kind of marking. Marcus found her in the Assembly's upper atrium, standing at the railing that overlooked the Grand Hall from above. She was Valish, tall, lean, with skin the color of aged copper, and a geometric pattern of darker pigmentation across her cheekbones and brow that shifted with mood. Her formal robes were deep blue, almost black, and her posture was military straight. Ambassador Cole, she didn't turn, you look like you're dying. Slower than I'd like, Marcus said, joining her at the railing. Below them the empty hall waited. The vote clock, 05:12:09. I voted for your resolution, Koth said. I don't know what more you want. A conscience vote motion for the Orinthian bloc. She turned then. Her facial pattern had shifted darker, sharper-edged, displeasure. No, delegate. I said no. Her voice was low, controlled, but the syllables landed like closed doors. Making that motion brands the Valish Accord as a human proxy. The pact will realign their shipping tariffs against my 12 worlds within a cycle. I cannot sacrifice my people's economic stability for. For what? Marcus said. His voice didn't rise. It never rose. But something in its register shifted, the way a foundation shifts under load. For a vote that ends 18 years of punitive sanctions against a species whose crime was answering a distress call. For a procedural motion that costs you nothing but 30 seconds on the floor. It cost me everything, Koth said. Perception, positioning. The pact watches who speaks for Earth. The pact watches who stays silent too. She stared at him. The pigmentation on her face was moving, complex, unreadable. Valish facial patterns were an emotional language that outsiders could barely parse. Marcus had spent 9 years learning to read the basics. He saw conflict. He saw something that might have been shame. Delegate Koth, he said, and his voice was very quiet now. In 9 years I have never asked you for a favor. I have never called on the fact that Valish merchants were the first to resume informal trade with Earth's colonies when the tariffs were biting hardest. I have never mentioned that my government noticed and that we have not forgotten. He paused. I am asking now. She turned back to the railing. Below, the hall was still empty. The vote clock ticked. If I make this motion, she said, and it fails. It won't fail. Thorn will endorse it. Mathis will split. And if the final count still comes up short, then it comes up short, and you will have been on the record on the right side, and my people will remember that too. A long silence. The twin suns through the dome had shifted again, late afternoon light, amber and thick, painting everything gold. I'll make the motion, Koth said, at the 800-hour mark, not before. Marcus nodded, thank you. Go sleep, Ambassador. After, he said. 4 hours left. The tally was shifting. Priya intercepted him in the corridor with her data slate glowing. Vaz confirmed. He flipped. His trade office ran the numbers, 23%, just like you said. He's voting yes. 38. Fen. Her board is in emergency session. The recount is happening, but she can't guarantee timing. What about the conscience motion? Koth confirmed she'll make it at the 800 mark. Thorn's aide confirmed endorsement. Mathis, Priya hesitated. Mathis hasn't responded. We don't know if he'll actually split. Marcus stopped walking. He pressed his palm against the corridor wall, cool, smooth, and closed his eyes for 3 seconds. When he opened them, the gray spots were back. Who else is reachable? He asked. Delegate Voss, Peripheral League. She was a soft no in the morning session. Why soft? Personal sympathy, political constraints. The Peripheral League abstained as a bloc, but she's the only one with any independent authority. Get me a meeting. Delegate Curran Voss of the Peripheral League was not in her suite, not in the refectory, not in the meditation gardens. Priya tracked her, after 30 minutes of quiet inquiries, to the Assembly's archives, a vast, climate-controlled hall of data crystal storage and reading stations where delegates could access the body's full institutional memory. Marcus found her at a terminal, scrolling through something he couldn't read at a distance. She was peripheral, humanoid, smaller than most Assembly species, with smooth, dark skin that had an almost obsidian sheen and large, pale gray eyes that reflected light like a cat's. She wore the Peripheral League's understated formal attire, a plain dark tunic over fitted trousers, no insignia. She saw him coming and didn't look surprised. Ambassador Cole, her voice was soft, precise. I assumed you'd find me. Delegate Voss, he pulled up a chair, wrong height again. You voted no this morning. I abstained. Different. Different in procedure. same in outcome. She acknowledged this with a slight tilt of her head. The Peripheral League votes as one. Our speaker instructed abstention. Your speaker isn't here. My speaker is watching the feed from Peripheral Station. Then your speaker will see what happens when the clock runs out. If 7 Sigma fails, the countermotion goes through tomorrow. 4 Kappa becomes permanent. Every peripheral world that trades with Earth, and there are 7, loses its best growth market for the next 6 years minimum. Voss's pale eyes reflected the terminal's glow. I'm aware of the economics. Then you're aware that abstention isn't neutral. Abstention is a vote for the status quo, and the status quo is costing your league. She turned from the terminal to face him fully. Ambassador, I respect your persistence. Truly, I've watched you work this floor for 3 years, but you're asking me to break with my block, which means my political career ends the moment the vote is recorded. Marcus leaned back. The chair was uncomfortable. Everything was uncomfortable. His body was a collection of protests he was ignoring. Delegate Voss, he said. What were you reading? She paused. Then she turned the terminal slightly so he could see. It was the Assembly's historical record of Resolution 4 Kappa, the original vote. The names of who voted for, against, abstained. 18 years ago, Voss said, I wasn't a delegate, I was an aide. I sat in the gallery and watched this body vote to punish a species for answering a distress call. I watched 80 sovereign delegations decide that saving refugees was a crime because it embarrassed the wrong people. Her voice was still soft, still precise, but something beneath it had shifted. I became a delegate because of that day. Marcus waited. If I vote yes, she said, I lose my seat. The League will recall me. Maybe. Definitely. Then you lose your seat. And you gain, he stopped. He was too tired for rhetoric, too tired for persuasion. I can't tell you what you gain. I can only tell you what the record says. 18 years from now, someone will sit in these archives and read the vote log for 7 Sigma. They'll see who voted to end it, and they'll see who abstained. She looked at him for a long time. Her pale gray eyes were very still. Go, Ambassador, she said. You need to be on the floor when the clock hits 800. She didn't say yes, she didn't say no. Marcus stood, nodded, and left. 2 hours left. The grand deliberation hall was filling. Delegates filtering in from corridors and lifts, their aides arranging data slates and comm units, the murmur of 40 languages filling the vast stone amphitheater like water rising. The glass dome overhead was dark with evening now. Ethys's twin suns had set, but the dome's internal lighting activated. Warm amber panels that mimicked daylight, keeping the hall bright. Through the dome's clear panels, the stars were visible, and among them the running lights of diplomatic vessels. Marcus took his seat. Humanity's seat, row 7, position 43. A single chair, slightly too large for him, with a data console built into the armrest that displayed his vote indicator. He'd sat in this chair, or one like it in earlier sessions, for 9 years. He knew every scratch on its surface. Priya stood behind him in the aide's position. She leaned down. Tally update. Vaz confirmed. Koth ready to motion. Thorn ready to endorse. Finn's board hasn't responded. Mathis hasn't responded. Voss unclear. 38 confirmed. 3 unknowns. 1 motion that might unlock 2 of them. Still 1 short if Finn or Voss didn't come through. The session chime sounded. High Arbiter Solen Drathai's hegemonic pact, the one who'd filed the counter-motion, took the speaker's platform. She was tall, even by Assembly standards, with pale violet skin and eyes like polished obsidian. Her formal robes were white and gold. Her voice carried the kind of authority that came from representing the winning side for 2 decades. The Assembly reconvenes for final deliberation on Resolution 7 Sigma, Drathais announced. The vote clock stands at 1 hour, 52 minutes. All delegates are reminded that a simple majority of 41 affirmative votes is required for passage. Abstentions count as neither. She paused. Her dark eyes swept the chamber. They lingered on Marcus for exactly 1 second longer than necessary. The floor is open for procedural motions. Marcus waited. The clock ticked. 52, 51, 50. At the 800 mark, 1 hour, 49 minutes remaining, High Delegate Shorn Koth rose from her seat on Level 2, Tier 6. The Valish Accord formally moves for a conscience vote declaration on the Orinthian block's binding, Koth said. Her voice was clear, steady, military straight like her posture. Under Assembly Procedure Article 17, Section 4, any bound voting bloc may, upon endorsement by one of its members, release individual delegates to vote by personal conscience on the matter at hand. The chamber stirred. Not a gasp, the assembly was too old, too formal for gasps, but a shifting, a rustling of robes, a turning of heads. Drathi's face showed nothing. Is there an endorsement from within the Orinthian bloc? Ambassador Selly's thorn rose. Slowly, painfully, Marcus could see the effort in his spine. His thin voice carried across the stone amphitheater. I endorse the motion. The Orinthian Republic's delegation is released to vote by conscience. The rustling grew. Across the chamber, Marcus saw delegates leaning to aides, whispering. The hegemonic Pact's 6-seat bloc was rigid, Drathi's jaw tight, her aides' hands moving on their data slates. The motion carries automatically upon endorsement, Drathi said. Her voice was controlled but clipped. The Orinthian bloc's binding is dissolved for this vote. Individual delegates may cast as they choose. Marcus watched the Orinthian section. 3 seats. Thorn settled back down. The mid-rank delegate Harvin face unreadable, and Mathis, young, broad-shouldered for an Orinthian, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. Mathis hadn't responded to anyone, hadn't confirmed, hadn't denied. Marcus realized he was gripping his own armrests. He released them. 1 hour, 20 minutes left. The floor debate continued, a final round of statements. Marcus didn't speak. He never did in these moments. The niche's rule held, brevity or silence. Let others fill the air. Let the room come to its own conclusion. High Arbiter Drathi spoke. The hegemonic Pact's position was clear. 4 Kappa was necessary, proportional, just. Earth's unilateral action had destabilized regional security. The tariffs maintained order. 3 Pactaline delegates echoed her. Their arguments were polished, rehearsed, familiar. Marcus had heard them for 9 years. Then a light on the Trilateral Commerce League section blinked. Delegate Fenn requesting the floor. Drathi acknowledged her. Fenn rose, 4 arms folded in the trilateral formal posture, 3 eyes forward. The Commerce League's board has completed a reassessment of our position on Resolution 7 Sigma, she said. In light of updated economic projections regarding the impact of continued Varath corridor checkpoint delays on our consortium's trade volume. Her voice was precise, clipped, utterly dry. The Trilateral Commerce League changes its vote from abstention to affirmative. Marcus didn't move. His face didn't change. 39. Too short, 1 hour, 18 minutes. Priya's hand touched his shoulder. Brief, gone. 1 hour left. The floor debate wound down. Delegates were restless, the longest continuous session in 3 cycles. Even assembly veterans were shifting in their seats, stretching their various limbs. The vote clock on the dome read 010000 in amber light. Marcus looked at the numbers. 39 confirmed. Thorn had voted against. He'd said he couldn't vote yes publicly without being recalled, and Marcus accepted that. Thorn's gift was the motion, not his own vote. Mathis was unknown. Voss was unknown. Every other reachable delegate had been contacted, counted, weighed. Too short, 2 unknowns. The chamber intercom chimed. Final vote will commence in 45 minutes, Drathi announced. All delegates are instructed to remain in their seats. Marcus sat. His body was a husk that his will was wearing. His eyes felt packed with sand. His pulse was steady, not calm, just too tired to race. He thought of nothing. He waited. 30 minutes. A light on the peripheral league section. Delegate Voss, requesting the floor. Drathis acknowledged her. Voss rose small, dark, her pale eyes reflecting the dome light like two moons. Point of personal statement, Voss said. Her soft voice carried in the stone chamber with unexpected clarity. The peripheral league speaker has instructed abstention. I am aware that this statement constitutes a departure from my block's position, and I accept the consequences. The chamber went very still. 18 years ago, Voss said, this assembly voted to punish a species for answering a distress call. I was an aide in the gallery. I watched it happen. I became a delegate so that, if this moment ever came, I could stand where I stand now. She paused. Her pale eyes found Marcus across the chamber, just for a moment. The peripheral league will abstain. I will not. She lifted her chin. I vote affirmative on Resolution 7 Sigma. Marcus's hands were perfectly still on the armrests. His face showed nothing. Inside his chest, something vast and tired shifted, like a continent moving a millimeter. 40. One short. 20 minutes. Marcus stared at the Orinthian section. Mathis, the young delegate, hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't signaled anything to anyone. His face, silver-green, lined with the faint ridges of Orinthian youth, was turned forward, fixed on the speaker's platform. His hands were still on his armrests. Thorn, beside him, hadn't looked at Mathis once. That was deliberate. Any visible coordination would give Drathis grounds to challenge the conscience vote on coercion grounds. 15 minutes. Marcus thought of 9 years, 3 attempts, hundreds of meetings, thousands of corridor conversations, 6 hours of sleep in 4 days, the colonies that had starved, the supply lines that had withered, 18 years of a punishment that had never been proportional for a crime that had never been a crime. He thought of nothing. 10 minutes. The vote clock, 00:10:00. Drathis called for final position confirmations. Delegates pressed their vote indicators. The board projected on the dome's inner surface updated in real time. Green for affirmative, red for negative, gray for abstention. Green lights appearing. One by one, Marcus counted, each one a conversation, a meeting, a number, a debt called in, or a truth laid bare. 35, 36, 37, 38. 39, 40. 40 green, 17 red, the hegemonic pact plus their reliable allies, 22 gray, abstentions, non-committed, absent. 40, the board hung there, 1 short. 5 minutes. Marcus watched the Orinthian section, 3 indicators. Thorn's glowed red, he'd voted against, as he'd said he must. Harvin's was gray, abstention, following the now-dissolved block's original position out of inertia. And Mathis's indicator was gray, uncommitted. 4 minutes. 3. Marcus didn't move, didn't signal, didn't look at Mathis with anything that could be read as pressure. He sat in his chair, row 7, position 43, with his hands on the armrests and his face as still as stone, and he waited. 2 minutes. The chamber was silent. 80 delegations, 200 aides, the assembly staff, the gallery observers, all watching the board, all counting. Everyone in the room could do the arithmetic. 1 minute. 30 seconds. Marcus was aware, distantly, that his vision had narrowed. Fatigue. The edges going dark. He held the center of his sight on the vote board and breathed. 20 seconds. And then, quietly, without ceremony, without rising from his seat, without looking at anyone, Delegate Mathis of the Orinthian Republic pressed his vote indicator. Green. The dome board updated, 41. The chamber didn't explode. It didn't erupt. This was the Galactic Assembly, too old, too formal for eruptions, but it cracked. A sound that Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. The collective intake of breath from 200 beings who had just watched mathematics defeat politics. High Arbiter Drathai stood at the speaker's platform. Her face was bloodless. Her jaw worked once, twice, as if testing whether her voice still functioned. Resolution 7 Sigma passes, she said. 41 affirmative, 17 negative, 22 abstentions. Resolution 4 Kappa is repealed, effective immediately. Earth's full trade sovereignty is restored. She set down her gavel. She did not use it. The aftermath was quiet. Delegates filed out. Aides collected data slates. The vote clock on the dome read 000000 and then went dark. Marcus stayed in his seat. He was aware that Priya was standing behind him, one hand on the back of his chair, not speaking. He was aware that delegates were passing his row, some nodding, some not looking, some moving quickly toward the exits as if proximity to the result might contaminate them. He was aware that his hands were shaking, just slightly, just the fine tremor of a body that had been running on will alone for 4 days and had just been told it could stop. He didn't stand, not yet. Across the chamber in the Orinthian section, Delegate Matthijs was still in his seat too, his indicator still glowing green, his face unreadable. He hadn't looked at Marcus, hadn't looked at Thorn. He was staring at the dark dome above, where the stars showed through the glass. Marcus wondered what it cost him. Wondered if he'd ever know. Koth passed his row. She paused just for a moment. Her facial pigmentation had settled into something calm, pale copper, smooth-edged. She said nothing, just the faintest nod. Then she was gone. Thorn didn't pass his row. The old Orinthian was gone from his seat already, probably to file whatever damage control his government would demand. Marcus thought of a 7-year-old girl on a refugee ship, 25 now, working in disaster relief, unforgiving. Priya leaned down. Marcus, it passed. I know. You need to sleep. I know. He sat for another minute. The hall emptied. The dome lights dimmed to evening mode, soft amber, gentle. The stars through the glass were bright now, unobstructed. The EDS patience was still there among them. Running lights steady, patient. Marcus stood, his legs held barely. He straightened his wrinkled suit, pulled his cuffs straight. Habit, 9 years of habit. Then he walked out of the grand deliberation hall on Ethais Station, through the corridor of white stone veined with copper that wasn't, past the refectory where Vaz had sat alone, past the archives where Voss had been reading the old vote, past the observation gallery where he'd looked down at empty seats 11 hours ago. He walked to his quarters. He opened the door. He sat on the edge of the bunk. And for the first time in 4 days, Ambassador Marcus Cole closed his eyes without a number in his head.